Our next panel, the machine of the future. That is roughly said about technology, ecology, and prosthesis. A lot of things, yeah. Thank you, Reto. So this kind of sums it up. It fulfills, in fact, the title of the conference, Homo ex Machina. And we start with Reto Schölly, who wrote a book of that same title. I would like to quote Homo ex Machina, die dritte Schöpfung, über die kybernetische Reflexivität zwischen Schöpfer und Geschöpf in Kunst und Technologie der Gegenwart. And he will tell us something about, let me say, about humankind and its idea of symbiosis with technology, just roughly said. Reto Schölly has an engineering diploma in cybernetic engineering, a master's degree in business administration, and a PhD in art philosophy. Is that right? Okay, perfect. He worked as software engineer, project manager, and as an artist, and exhibited his works on several places, from Vienna over Taiwan to Berlin. Reto Schölly currently works as a teaching fellow at the University of Freiburg, where he teaches computational modeling and robot design, theory, practice, philosophy. Previous lectures include digital image processing, cybernetic aesthetics, microcomputer engineering, and innovation and technology management. Und ohne jetzt weiter zu zögern, würde ich dich direkt auf die Bühne bitten.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Hufschmidt for even inviting me. And I hope this doesn't make you uncomfortable, but I really love your suit. I really love it because it also, it really matches you. It works for you, and it also looks like my book. And the book's title is Homo ex Machina even. I mean, that's just a coincidence I couldn't believe. So that's cool. That's for you. I'll give it to you afterwards. What I want to present or talk to you about is a lot of things. And the title of my thoughts is Homo ex Machina, the third creation, the part 2. This is part 1, and the other one is what you hear now is part 2, and I will read some passages from a book I'm currently working on. And I want to say I have a rather unusual position in the community of art philosophers because I'm so extremely optimistic. The world is a great place, the world is good. I mean, there's still suffering, there's a lot of suffering. However, I dare anybody who doesn't believe me to tell me when and where life was ever better than here and now. And I say, we will meet, maybe even during my lifetime, a new golden age which has eliminated poverty, starvation, and the continuing damage to nature. Just a little shout out to my website. Don't want to advertise it, but a script to my presentation will be uploaded to www.reto-schölly.com. So if you want to have the script, you can download it there. Not today, but during the next days. So what is technology? It's called a technotope. The term was coined by Klaus Erlach, who is a technology philosopher, and whom I had the pleasure to meet one day. And his book, Das Technotope, the technotope, describes as technology being an essential, integral part of the human biotope. In my latest book, so this is this here, again, I don't want to advertise it, it's 49 euros, so whatever. Anyway, no, I've made clear, or I've illustrated that the primary defining characteristics from my position of humanity is their vital dependence upon designing and creating technologies. And though it is true that besides humans, many other life forms use something we would call technology, it is only humans whose primary trait it is to develop technology and subsequently become dependent on it. This has happened since the Stone Ages. The first great invention was the hand axe, and since then a step to a computerized construction and production machine is very small. But the idea to deliberately think about and create a hand axe is so great. I would call it the only human invention. Yeah, all the rest is just purely derivative, in my opinion. And that's how I see it. Other life forms like bonobos or Japanese baboons, they cook. They throw potatoes in salt water because they taste better. And even if they are a little rotten, they become edible again. Some apes use sticks to dig for termites or ants. Some birds pick up small rocks to throw at snail houses and eat the snails. So technology is not inherent to only humans, but the dependence on technology, and we are all dependent on technology, whether we believe it or not, that's purely human. Enough about that. Human and technology exist, in my opinion, in a bilateral symbiosis, whatever. What is it called? Anyway, and they are interconnected through feedback loops where one influences the other and vice versa. No cave paintings could document a successful hunt if the technology of brushing colorful clay into a stone wall was known. By the way, cave paintings weren't really to tell history. They were rituals to coerce the ghosts and spirits to help them in the next hunt. But anyway, no science fiction can be made without science, while science seems to be influenced by science fiction. It seems to me, at least, obvious that 3D printing technology was, in part at least, inspired by Star Trek's replicators. Because now, at my house, I have a 3D scanner and a 3D printer, and I can literally copy things. Not perfectly. The technology is not there yet, but I can still copy things. I'm going to never buy anything out of plastic anymore, because why buy it when I can make it? And I can make a better one than the stuff they sell at the stores. It seems also obvious to me that smartphones were, for instance, inspired, in part at least, by Star Trek's tricorders. And by the way, I think my smartphone looks better than the Star Trek tricorder. And with our smartphones, we can actually detect, with the right app, the health status of a person. I've worked in a project where the camera could be used to measure the heart rate, because if your heart is beating, you just become redder each beat, tiny little bit. A human can't see it, but a good camera can. And however, I must admit, it does not work so well with people with dark skin, which is not because I don't want it to work with them. It's just technology isn't that good. Or maybe I'm not as good as a programmer, but it's not that I'm trying to discriminate against people from that have a different color than my skin. That's not the reason. But anyway, it is indeed possible to detect the pulse and the health status of a person using the built-in camera, if it's a good one. And while technology has made us live longer and safer, it seems likely that it has also shaped our very thought processes. Memorization is now less crucial to an academic career than the ability to understand complex processes. And as we clearly saw during our course, Robot Design Theory, Practice, Philosophy, you don't need to memorize much, but you have to understand. That's the thing. Sometimes it's mourned that we don't memorize things anymore and we can just look up everything. No, I would say it opens us up for the opportunity to deeper understanding something. And that's what I'm asking of my students, to understand something. If they can't memorize it, they don't care, but if they understand it, that's the important part. And I have to look up, I have to check my own books sometimes to remind me when I forgot something. So the topic here is autopoietic constructivism, and we see that there is a so-called autopoietic constructivist mechanism which, with or without human intervention, evokes its own dynamic and leads to a new cultural and technological technotopes like Klaus Ellach wrote about, and they require humans to adapt to. In German, we say, ich bediene einen Computer. That means I serve a computer. The computer is the master, you're the servant. That's just a thought I want to infect you with. And that's, I think it's a nice idea. We will, not we, I will. Why did I write we? Now I was thinking about having my assistant working with me on that, that's why I wrote we, and then he didn't have time, whatever. But anyway, dark pictures of technology. Something I encounter quite often during my lectures and during my talks and among students is technology is often perceived as something hostile. It isn't. Technology is an integral part of human life in every culture I've heard of, and since the Stone Ages, and thus is part of humanity's living environment, the technotope. And it's also, it's undeniable that technology has been part of massive destruction of nature. I'm not denying that. However, putting the blame on technology and subsequently engineers on that is false. It's bad, it's unfair because everybody uses it. Everybody does. And quite often, like Francis Ford Coppola illustrated this in the movie Koyaanisqatsi, Life Out of Balance, or Charles Spencer Chaplin's 1936 film, Modern Times. The existence of global warming and the fact that it is rooted in modern times industry is indeed, or has indeed been given overwhelming scientific evidence. Yet, if technology truly is part of the human's biotope and Elachian technotope, it is also inseparable from human nature. And while today some peoples exist who still live the lifestyle of Bronze Age people, which I deeply respect, don't get me wrong, but one must know that even these civilizations, these old civilizations, like the Amazon Native Americans, they have done a lot of modification of nature. They have redirected the whole Amazon River, which is, I don't know how they did that, but they did. And of course, they didn't do that much destruction as we do today. However, it's all our fault, everyone's fault. Yours, mine, everybody's fault. Nobody's free of guilt here. That's what I want to make clear. It's important to me, really. Sometimes I have students that come to me and say, yeah, well, that's capitalism. Capitalism is bad. And since I do have also a background in economics, I just ask them, what is capitalism? Yeah, it's exploitation of people. No. It's a clear definition what capitalism is, and you find it in basic literature. Capitalism is the practice to use so-called capital in order to make a structure to provide jobs and ultimately receive a turnover. That's what capitalism is. And I can give you I don't have I forgot to put in the quote, but anyway. And that's what it does. If capital, in that case, is not only necessarily money, it's also knowledge. It's also material, or it's also the skills of people. And economic science has 50 years ago figured out that happy, well-paid, and very well taken care of workers just give the company more money. And that is why in Germany and in many other places I've visited, this mentality has been implemented. If you have a happy workforce, you'll make more money. And that's just this notion of exploitation of people's simply, well, wrong in those cases I know, and maybe true in some others, but not in those I have seen. Often, one of the problems that has been talked about is mass production would be bad. Yes, mass production is part of a lot of the damage that is being done to the environment. But no mass production would mean no internet. Just impossible to make an internet happen without mass production. It's not possible. It's not too difficult. It's not possible. Computers would not be affordable. Simply not be affordable. Your average PC would not cost 500 euros. It would cost 5 million euros. I think like that. That's what it is. Mass production also is more energy efficient. That's just true. And medication would not be affordable for most people if there was no mass production. The same goes for scientific exchange. What we must do, if a autopoietic constructivist mechanism should be really implemented or let happen better, we must be absolutely sure that we favor episteme over doxa, like evidence over belief. That is important. And that is, I say this because I see it in my students, is something that we are slipping away of. And I consider this extremely dangerous. We know one thing. There was a short article in the Tagesspiegel that says, which is really backed by economic research, which says that in 1999, 29% of the people lived in absolute poverty, which was crazy high. But now in 2012, only 13% did. That's because of capitalism, like I defined it before. I totally agree, and I understand if you don't agree with what I'm saying next, and that's fine. We can discuss it, and it's okay, but please hear me out. No Marxism, because I've read Marxist literature, and the problem is, it's necessity of universal consent. And without universal consent, it has, at least historically, always broken down into a totalitarian, oppressive regime, which has happened like everywhere in history. And that is why I say that often to students, much to their resentment, that this is not a good way to go. I think that Professor Reto says, if I remember correctly, you said that we need more humanity, we need more compassion. Yes, I fully agree with that. But we don't need communism, to be sure, because we know what happens if at least one group is sufficiently against that idea. We've seen that a dozen times. So about autopoietic constructivism, autopoiesis, maybe, I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with that term. Autopoiesis means self-creation, or self, like poiesis, to make itself. And autopoiesis in cybernetics and in nature actually is a mechanism that allows for things to organize themselves. That is not something that's hypothetical, it's something we can literally see. It's, for instance, the idea that, or the effect that freezing water can lead to symmetrical hexagonal snowflakes, because it's just because of the shape of the water. And we can see we can see these mechanisms in crystallization processes and many natural systems. For instance, leafcutter ants. My favorite animal is the leafcutter ant hive, or the colony. I consider the whole colony an animal on its own. It's because an individual is dumb. I mean, an individual cannot really do much, but as a collective, they're pretty wise, pretty efficient. They're a society. They do farming. They bury their dead. They're really an entity on its own. And so autopoiesis is not a hypothetical thing. It's something that we can literally observe in nature and in technology. yeah, so what I want to do is I want to tell you why I'm convinced that we will have a really, really, really great world. But first, 5 things that must not, what are prerequisites to it. We must understand that no sustainable change can happen quickly. Quite often I hear sometimes students, sometimes also professors who say, we have to change that now. It's not going to work. It's not going to work, especially when it comes to energy, material, and knowledge. No sustainable change can happen quickly. And as in nature, the human technology nature construct must be allowed to self-regulate to at least some degree, which is one of the points I'm gladly making against Marxism, because Marx suggested the 5-year planning cycle, which is seriously will not work at all, ever. And instead of destroying the bad, support the good. That's something I'm really adamant about. Let knowledge flow freely and allow configuration that emphasizes natural self-regulation. Because self-regulation that's the optimum. The professor said that reaching perfection is just not feasible, because when you reach it, you're done. And she's absolutely right. Yet optimization is something that nature strives toward by just killing those who are not optimal. That's natural selection, and that's what nature does. Yeah, that was basically what I want to say. 3 things we need to do is energy, material, and knowledge. I was so amazed when I became a board member of the Science and Technology organization. We make science shows for like non-scientists. We explain this sciences to people who are not necessarily scientists. And we found that knowledge, so enlightenment, telling people about it, is like the most important part. Everybody of us, really, as scientists or people interested in science, have to do. And I say we need nothing more: energy, material, and knowledge. There is a plethora of clean energy technologies around. It's, for instance, there is a project I've just recently discovered it, but it's 5 years ago. I should have known about it earlier. But this project is basically a helium balloon with some blades. They're just wind power generation. And those do not stand somewhere in the forest. You can attach them to your house. And I've worked at an institute that had a collaboration project with a University of Tel Aviv, and in Israel they subsequently built a solar thermal power plant, which just makes a liquid very hot and can generate vast amounts of energy. Even at night, when there's no sun, they still have 50% of the power because the water is still hot, or whatever the liquid is. So we have so many ways to generate very clean energy. And I'm not saying they're perfect. There's always a downside. There's also always a problem. But we have the chance and the ability to do it. We just have to do it. I can't do it alone, but yeah. If we have enough energy, we have no more material problems, what I would say, because, well, garbage is gold. We were not going to be fighting about who has to have the garbage dump in front of their houses. No, we're going to fight on who gets to have it. Because garbage it's a bad word for a wonderful thing. Garbage contains the highest concentration of natural resources there is. There's just no place anywhere that has more natural resources. We have the technology to divide that up into raw materials again. However, it takes a lot of energy, and thus we can't really do it. That's the reason. Energy, material, knowledge, those three things. If we can do that, then we have the autopoietic constructivist mechanism. It will happen on its own. Who has the upper hand? Well, there's this debate I often have. It's ideology versus reason, belief versus fact, and feeling versus evidence, and I support the latter, as you probably have surmised already. By autopoietic constructivism, I describe the self-organizing characteristics of both natural and artificial entities, which evoke complex behavior through their own properties and their bilateral interactions and feedback loops. And as I've said, those happen, for instance, in leafcutter ants. An interesting anecdote, we have these mechanisms too, and sometimes in a bad context. A colleague of mine who used to work for the German Telekom, you know, that's a German organization that used to be a government-run organization, now is a semi-private one, whatever. They had installed a mobile phone tower in a village in the Black Forest. But yet the people were afraid that the smartphones would, or the radiation of the tower would like make them sick. They had a petition going to that the tower would not be built, but it still went through, and they built the tower. And after some time, people started getting sick, getting headache, sleeplessness, restlessness. It was a terrible thing. It was diagnosable, medically diagnosable. They asked the mayor to sue the company, the telecom, to just put down the tower because it was making people sick. Telecom answered, hey, we haven't even connected it to the power grid yet. Yeah, but that's an autopoietic mechanism. The belief that it is bad for you and the social interactions with other people who believe it's bad for you, they lead to really diagnosable. I'm not laughing at those people. I'm just diagnosing them. This mechanism leads to provable symptoms. And that was the mechanism. It sounds like a funny story, but I think it's pretty dark. People are afraid of something that they shouldn't be afraid of. One reason why I say life is good, the world is good, of course there's suffering, but there's less suffering than there used to be. I think most of us can agree on that, I hope. But there's always only one thing wrong with the world. Did you notice that? There's always either terrorism or the plague. There's never the plague and terrorism. It's just doesn't happen. There was the swine flu. No, first there was terrorism, then there was the swine flu, then there was terrorism again, and now we have coronavirus. And the terrorists just say, I don't know, do they have a conference whether they just say, where all the viruses and the terrorists meet and say, hey, come on, who gets to bother the world the next year? They say, hey, come on, virus, we have done all the bothering last year, so please, you take over virus. And when the viruses become boring, it's terrorism again, I can tell you that. There's only one thing wrong in the world, and it's only, whatever. It's not a joke, it's really true. I've written about it in this book. Again, it's not to advertise the book, but I wouldn't be very sad if you bought it. Anyway, here I switched. This is my notes, and the bullet points are on the notes, so I don't know. That's not really that important. I'm over the time. Can I have 3 more hours? No? How much time do we have left? 2 minutes. Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, I say that we need but these three things: energy, material, and knowledge. And through autopoietic constructivist mechanisms, we will simply eliminate. And I'm sure of that. I know I shouldn't look into the future. The professor said I shouldn't, you shouldn't trust somebody who prophesizes. I'm not saying you should trust me, because you should never trust somebody who tells you to trust them, because there's always something wrong with them. But anyway, I'm absolutely positively optimistic, let's put it like that, that if we allow these things to happen, which I described, clean energy, clean material, and knowledge, poverty, as we know it today, and as it still exists today, still 13% of human beings are in absolute poverty, which is terrible. It's still half of what it used to be for 20 years ago, but still it's terrible. But it's going away, and it will go away if we let this happen. If we invest into knowledge and all the sciences, not only the engineering sciences, all the sciences, art philosophy, physics, and sociology, and all of them, that is what we have to do. And if energy is there, there's material. And if material is there, there's food. There's no starvation. If knowledge, energy, material is there, the will of a populace to support the government's tendency to go to war dwindles. No government that governs happy people can start a war. That's I have no proof for that, but I'm convinced that a populace, a people which is sort of happy, will never accept a government to go to war. If we have energy, material, and knowledge, that means also education, who would go to war? Nobody would want to, right? I mean, why? There's no reason for that. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen in an article I've read by Guido Mingels. He said that really the number of deaths and suffering in war has gone down in the last 200 years. And I know about the terrible horrors of World War I and II. I know about that. It's less than before compared to the size of the population. War is a bad thing. And I think it will become scarcer and scarcer. So I want to give you an optimistic view of the world. Humanity is not on a downward spiral, because every generation I know always says the next generation is lazy, stupid, and doesn't work anymore. Every generation, every generation. Those of my friends who have kids say the next generation was lazy, stupid, and doesn't work anymore. And they forgot that their parents said that to them, and their parents forgot that their parents said that to them, and they forgot that Plato in his Politeia, I think Politeia said that about his people too. So you can read the rest if you like. Everything gets better in the long run. I thank you very much for your thing.